This is the Super Sports Schools podcast, bringing you stories of our future stars, powered by Spur Steak Ranchers.
1, 2, 3, go!
I'll ask you and then you ask me.
Okay. There we go. Easy.
Okay. And then we'll ask you.
I mean, he was my teammate for a few years.
Really?
So, yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Really?
I played. I know, it's shocking. Do you know guess what position I played?
Lock.
Scrum half.
No, stop it.
We're going to be talking about rugby refereeing. Considering now, more than ever before, school rugby is accessible through Supersport schools to be streamed around the world and watched, and decisions can be minutely examined. We've also seen the drama unfolding at the Autumn Nations series, and it's something I'm interested in, being a school and club referee. We'll talk about grassroots refereeing, whether it's worth getting started to give back to the game. We'll talk about how best players can have a positive interaction with the referee during their matches. And we'll also talk about some laws with World Rugby Referee Ben O'Keefe, who was one of the assistant referees in the Rugby World Cup Final 2019 and is widely regarded as one of the best referees in the world. But most importantly, in this episode, we're going to try and answer the question, is it time for a TMO in school rugby? To do that, I'm joined by my good friend and rugby enthusiast, Tim, and also women's rugby referee, Zoe. Guys, welcome to it.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, we're excited to have you here. I mean, to us, rugby enthusiasts, rugby's been our life. I mean, Alex and I, when I started playing rugby, grade 4, Alex was there, my teammate the whole time. Gone to uni, plays the rugby there. He's there reffing. So we wanted to know, what's your rugby story like?
So I initially started with touch rugby and then moved to full contact in matric, actually. From there, I just fell in love. Started playing, did a reffing course, did some coaching on the side, and now not playing anymore, only reffing and coaching.
And what's that progression been like? Where are you at the moment? What are some of the highlights for you in terms of refereeing?
So last year, December, I was put on the SA Rugby Women's National Panel. So that's definitely a highlight for me in my reffing career. And being selected to AR at the World Cup for sevens.
Yeah, so I mean, in a sport that's very male dominated, I mean, we're just wondering, what is it like being a woman ref in a very men dominated sport?
It's difficult to navigate this system of, people not being used to having a female referee. So I must say I do get a lot of slack a lot of the time, people thinking I don't actually know what rugby is, but I do. So yeah, it's difficult on some days, and then on others it's actually great because there's a lot of respect that's built up. And, I think with the increase in the numbers of women referees, it's getting a lot better.
I mean, we always know Tim says constantly that when he watches me ref, is constantly shouting, even if I'm just assistant refereeing, running up and down the touchline. There's so many laws, there's so much complication around the laws, but if a game is refereed well, it helps players and those watching to understand. So what would be your advice to upcoming players and to upcoming referees as well to get the most positive outcome from the game and from that interaction that they can?
So from a player's perspective, I would recommend learning the laws. It'll make you a better player, and the easiest way you can do that is by downloading the World Rugby Laws book on your phone and just going through that, because it's great to know what the signals actually are and what they meant. But then if you are a junior, say, player that's wanting to venture into the refereeing side, just do one of those junior courses. They happen every so often through Western Province and all the other unions. But if you're not a junior and a senior, again, same story. They have the courses every now and then, and it will take your game to the next level.
And I want to talk about a specific part of the game, right, which is the breakdown and specifically going for the steal, okay? Because that's something in South African rugby we love doing. We love a good steal. We've got players who are very good at it. Steal, also called jackling now in international. I don't know where that's come from. In like the last,
It's like a jackal running into the hole, stealing a rabbit.
I mean, it's weird because we've got lots of jackals in South Africa, but it started overseas, I'm pretty sure. So that's suddenly now what it's called. It's called jackling. Even in the laws, they've added some a definition for what a jackal is, and basically a good solid steal. Tim, how much do you love it when a team does a fantastic turnover and gets rewarded?
I mean, it's such a relief. I mean, especially from a player standpoint, when you're actually playing the game and you've been on defense for like 5-10 minutes and they're just constantly knocking you back and you're like, you're just trying your best to hold structure, and then you see a guy there, number 2, and he's like, oh, what's happening here? You know, the blow from the ref, you're like, oh, it's our ball now. It's exhilarating, honestly, just for a turnover ball. And even while watching rugby, you know, watching a team go down, it's right by the try line, and then there's a steal. It's exhilarating.
And I think for referees, it's also exciting because that's, I think, viewed as more of a positive penalty.
Yes.
Because you're rewarding positive, good play.
Yeah.
In a good, strong steal.
Yeah, and it also makes, from our side, it also makes the game a lot more exciting. We know sometimes there's a team that dominates, so for the team that's not doing so well to get a good steal and, you know, as you said, a positive penalty, it makes it a lot more interesting.
So I thought that jackling was so important in that it's something that gets blown up quite often because you might just not have rolled away in time before your player's gone down, or your hands have gone past the ball, or you're not on your feet. So I spoke to World Rugby Referee and New Zealand Rugby Referee Ben O'Keefe to get his opinion on what makes a good jackal and to break down a quick crash course basically on how to go about it and how to get positively rewarded for it. And this is what he had to say. Ben, welcome to the podcast. Could you start off by just saying how you would introduce yourself to someone who has never met you or heard of you?
Thanks, Alex. Well, it's a pleasure to be on the show. And normally how I'd introduce myself, a big hello. And my name is Ben O'Keefe. I'm a New Zealand rugby referee. I'm full-time with New Zealand Rugby and referee at all levels in New Zealand, Super Rugby and internationally as well.
Could you explain to us kind of maybe a very quick crash course on what you're looking at when there's a jackal and what the best way to jackal is to get a positive outcome from that?
Yeah, I love a jackal, and I mainly love a jackal because for me, I guess my philosophy around a game of rugby is that I love space to play, I love a good contest, I love a good turnover, and I like quick ball. So they're my 4 things. That's sort of like an overarching picture of how I try and referee a game. So if I can provide good space, I can provide a good contest, and you know the ball's pretty quick for the team that has possession, then I think we generally have a really, really good game. So in terms of good turnovers, you know, jackling is really important because that's a real way where, you know, you get some of the best jacklers in the world and aren't just 7s anymore. You get 6, 7s, 8s. Malcolm Marx, you know, hooker, you know, you get some of the best turnovers in the world because he gets low and over the ball. So it's a really, really good opportunity where players can be on attack. You can be in attack on the halfway. You can be attack on the 5-metre line. If you can get in and on the ball, you can actually be rewarded. So it is something that I sort of know around my game that I do give a lot of jackal penalties because I like to reward players that are in and over the ball. I'm actually just looking back at the stats of my game for the South Africa-Australia match, and I don't think I actually gave. I gave one holding on penalty in the 11th minute, which, you know, for me is actually unusual, but it just shows that the game's changed. So depending on the speed of the game, depending on the opposition, depending on the tactics that teams do, there aren't always opportunities for jacklers to actually get on the ball. But when I do see a player in a position when they enter the tackle correctly, they're on their feet, so they're supporting their own body weight. Their hips are sort of over their feet, so they're not too long, okay? So they're not overextending, and they've got both hands on the ball and they're lifting, and that those hands haven't gone past the ball or haven't gone to the side of the ball. Then I'll generally say, well, this player has to win the ball. If they don't win the ball, in terms of turning it over, well, it's obvious that the player on the ground has held on. And I think, you know, the way that the game's moved, we've allowed holding on and jackling to continue because it is a good part of the game. But we're wanting the player to actually be seen to be lifting the ball and not just stapling over it. So I reckon that's been a change over the past 2 to 3 years. And those changes as referees, even though I like a jackler, you do have to adapt and you do have to adjust as those laws do change too. So I've had to go from, you know, potentially allowing maybe 3 or 4 years ago that sort of staple position where, you know, elbows and forearms are on the ground. I've had to change and twig that to say that, well, actually, I need to see the player on the ball and lifting. If they're not, then they're going to be cleaned out. And that's been the shift around that ruck, is they're trying to actually raise the ruck height so players aren't diving in off their feet. So jacklers, when they go in on the ball, they're a little bit higher, so they have an opportunity to be cleaned off. But if you get someone like Malcolm Marx, who's, you know, so strong on the ball, he can still be in a position where he's supporting his body weight lifting as well and get the turnover. So that's kind of how I would explain it. It's a big part of the game of rugby. And I think it's a really, really good way for teams if they can get really good and good positions. They can disrupt ball for sure.
But I want to talk a bit now about young referees who want to get involved in refereeing, or young people who want to get involved in refereeing, or just anybody who is new to it. I've been refereeing for about 5 years, but 2 years of that was COVID. So realistically 3 at school level and then a little bit of club. And the one thing I have spoken about to other referees, there's one feeling is when we watch rugby on TV and then afterwards there's all these tweets and there's this chaos about the referee's decisions and all of that, it can be kind of, I guess, off-putting at times to think, is this really what I want to go into? But then at other times, people handle pressure so well. So to put it into perspective, I think we came from the British and Irish Lions series where we had all the controversy in the first test match, then you came into the second test match. And then we have the Rugby Championship now where we've got Nick White's slapped by Faf de Klerk and then Faf gets yellow carded and potential in the corner try was Gorobete legal, etc. But then you came into the second test match and this isn't just me saying this. We've got this, one of the, I guess, publications in South Africa ask the public to rate the ref after each match of the Rugby Championship, which isn't a very objective way of doing it because it's asking basically South African fans to rate the ref. And South African fans are rarely happy, even if South Africa wins. But on the kind of 5 levels that they are, there's like from good to excellent, which is 3 levels, and then there's below par and poor. You by far had the highest rating from good to excellent of any of the Rugby Championship refs. So it was 82%, which is like no one else was even close to that. And you've come in after all this pressure. And basically the question in here is, how would you motivate people to referee? Because you can still be good at it. As much as the media makes all this noise about it, you can still be good, you can still deal with the pressure, and you can still enjoy it. So what would you say to people who want to get involved in it but might be a bit hesitant?
Yeah, I mean, geez, that's a lot. I actually wasn't across any of that social media stuff, so no, it's a pleasure. And look, one thing I do like about South African rugby fans is that they are so passionate. And when you have passionate people that love something so much, like rugby, it makes you want to be better as a referee. It makes me want to be better for the game of rugby because people love it so much. And I guess that's a lot of the pressure that I feel. And I mean, all referees feel pressure when we go into matches because we want to do a good job. We want to do a good job for both teams, regardless of what happened the week before, regardless of what competition we're in. We always feel pressure because we step across that white line at the start of the 80 minutes. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know if it's going to be 80 points to 0. We don't know if it's going to be 19 or draw. We don't know. We're going to have 6 red cards, 4 yellow cards. We just don't know. But what we've got to do is prepare ourselves mentally, physically throughout the whole week. That's how I'm going to try and keep getting better. Is I'm going to do really good reviews and be really thorough. I'm going to put my hand up when I'm wrong. So then at the next game, I can be better. And then the next game, I can be better. So, like, for example, the Lions series was a huge honor to be part of, but it was a huge challenge as well. Like that week that led into that second test. Obviously, we had a lot of pressures externally. We had a lot of pressures in the game. So my job was actually to go out there and actually put a really good performance, a refereeing performance for both teams, be really fair, set some really good boundaries, communicate really well. And I know that the game went for like 3 hours or something, but we had to be really specific around what we're doing. The players wanted to push and shove, so we had to call time off. There were a few tight little TMO scenarios in terms of the grounding, so we had to look at that. There was some foul play, so it had everything. But what I was really proud of as a team is that, we worked really hard that week to iron out the creases that we had as a team in the week before. And we worked really hard, and I really was grateful for my assistant referees and my TMO to actually go out there and be able to perform like that and then, close the series out where, in the third game, no one was really talking about the referees. And that's the same thing in any game that we have. And, leading into World Cup next year, I'm sure there'll be moments where referees or decisions are talked about. But I'd love to be able to get to, through a World Cup and, everyone's just talking about the rugby. And that's the goal. That's the ideal goal. So, for any young referee that's wanting to be part of the game, the way that it can improve you as a person and a human being is I feel like it definitely outrides, or outweighs any of the potential negatives. But you do have to have a good support network around you. You do have to talk to a lot of people to actually work out how you can, push those negatives away and just look to the positives in the future. So, if anyone was going to be put off refereeing because of that, I'd say, look, give it a go. Talk to me, talk to other referees, and you'll see some huge gains, not just in your rugby, but just in your life outside of rugby.
Come on, wake up now. Who got zombie? Wake up now. Sequilatos cut. Wake up now. Who got my sign? Get up and go.
With 15 delicious breakfasts, Spur is the place to be until 11 every morning. Enjoy an unreal breakfast, still just $49.90. Spur, people with a taste for life.
Wake up now. Come on. Yeah.
Now, Tim, I wanted to talk about the match we were on commentary for earlier this year. It was, you remember, third team, Bish Bosch, the first derby of the year, because there are two, on the Piley Reese, the main field at Bishop's. Third team game, so the crowd's busy building up for the second and first team game. It's got just one referee and schoolboys running touch on each side. Right at the end, Rondebosch were leading, but Bishops were on the attack. It was extra time, so last movement, a knock-on would have ended the match. Going into touch would have ended the match, but Bishops had the ball. They were in Rondebosch's 22. Rondebosch was about to get a turnover, win a turnover, but then Bishops managed to get it out, spread it wide, charged down the touch line, and then in the corner, kind of feet going out at the same time, diving for the corner. Referee went and chatted with the linesman and they awarded the try. And we were able to see afterwards that there were a couple feet, like multiple times trailing into touch.
Oh.
But it was such a difficult situation. The referee had to go and consult with the linesman, who was a Bishop's boy, and Bishops had scored. And that's an impossible situation to put him in. He might not have even been sure. But we went quite mad in commentary with just the drama of the event. But what this builds into saying is that there have been occasions this year, especially, that we've seen there might be some argument now and some justification for getting a TMO for school rugby matches. Maybe not necessarily third team, but definitely for the higher teams when you've got, super sport schools there with several angles covering the match. Do you think, as a referee, that it is time to get a TMO in school rugby?
100%. I know, especially for, I would say, like the first team game or under 16A, pushing it, maybe even the second team, that might be needed. Those boys are potentially moving on to very higher grade rugby the next year, and they need to start preparing themselves for, what it's like in the more semi-professional, professional sides. So yeah, and it will make the job for the referee a lot easier, making those very difficult calls. To that, as I'm saying that, I would also only have the TMO in specific times of the game. So that's with the try, scoring a try, and also foul play. Other than that, I would not bring the TMO in any other section of the game.
As someone watching, what do you think?
Yeah, in the build-up to this question, my initial thought is just, we don't really need it. It's schoolboy rugby. These guys are 17, 18, just trying to chuck a ball around. The obvious fear is that it's going to slow down the game. And as a supporter, you're really just there for the fun times. The outcome is cool and it's nice, but at the end of the day, you're just there for the experience, and that could kill it. But hearing your guys' perspectives, I see the merit in having it. For refs as a whole, it gives you the opportunity to be assured of what you're doing.
Yeah.
And also, considering that a lot of you guys are using schoolboy rugby as a training ground for higher levels, having that experience, using TMO, you're not going into the next stage with no experience of using it.
So I think what we're getting from that is that there's initially this fear that it's just going to make an already too professional kind of game, school rugby specifically, even more professional. But then also, maybe because it's already so intense and so high stress for everybody involved, it could actually help with that a bit.
Yeah, to be fair, it's just, like you guys are saying, it's just on the implementation. If it's going to slow down the game to a crawl where after every little thing is let me check with the box. Let me check with the boxes. Again, these are just kids just trying to chuck a ball around. But if you implement it in a way that, you're just using it to reassure yourself that you've made the right call and that, something that is a pivotal point isn't missed, then I think there's a place for it.
100% agree.
World Rugby Referee Ben is still with us. Ben, what are your thoughts on this?
Look, I think we should have TMOs. I think you're right. Like, as you said, Alex, the game is already professional. Schoolboys now go from school into the Springboks, into the All Blacks, into the Wallabies, So, these players' careers start in school. They go straight into super teams. They're playing test match rugby. And, I think we owe it to school games. If they do have cameras, if they do have, I've seen on Super Sport how they have, 6 to 8 cameras. It's like a proper Super Rugby game for some of the schoolboy games. So I think you're right. Like if there's a clear knock on or a clear foot and touch, or a clear piece of foul play that everyone can see at home, but because there's no TMO part of the game, I think that's a bit of a disservice, because these careers could be changed based on them not scoring a try or not getting through to a final because of an error. Because as referees, the game's so much quicker. Schoolboy rugby's exciting, it's quick, it's fast paced. There are times that we're gonna miss things. I'm gonna miss things, no matter. I've done 34 test matches and refereed for years. I'll still miss things, and we'll rely on my TMO. Now, the balance that we want to do is, like you said, is we don't want to drag the games out. So we don't want the TMOs going through and checking on everything. We just want them for the big moments. And for example, what we did in NPC this year, which is the national competition here in New Zealand, is the TMOs didn't have the ability to actually rewind. Okay, they weren't like an international rugby where they can look at all 20 different angles, they can pause, they can rewind, they can give us live calls. What the TMO could do is they sit on the sideline and they literally just watch the TV footage. And so they're watching the same replays that the broadcast and the director's actually showing to the world. So in the lead up to a try, if they see a clear knock on, they can come in and say, check. They can come in and say, look, there's a knock on in the lead up to the try. And I think that's been really good, because it's stopped, I guess, the TMOs from hunting for things, and it's allowed the game to flow. But it's meant that if there's anything clear and obvious on replay or something that the officials miss, well, we can clean that up. Only takes a few seconds, and we get the right decision for the game and outcome for the game. So I think I think the professional era of schoolboy rugby is going to force us to bring in TMOs. And I think what we need to do as a group of match officials, whether in South Africa, New Zealand or Australia, is actually just work on the limitations of what that TMO can come in for. And I think if we get that balance right and that balance correct, we won't see games drag out, but we will see games being won appropriately by the team that should have won, and not because of an error, which can happen in games because the game's so fast.
Cool, thanks, Ben. I think that NPC idea is quite interesting. I mean, that could be a way forward to implement it in school rugby.
Yeah, so actually this year at the Varsity Sevens, that's sort of what we did. If you weren't reffing, you were up at the TMO box, and same thing, we couldn't rewind or anything. We would just have to say, director, can you please give us the last shot? And we'd rewatch it, and then we'd have to make a decision within 30 seconds. So it was a nice quick thing. Okay, this is what you can do. This is my suggestion, and that was it. So we really tried to keep the communication nice and short. And I think if we had to replicate that in schoolboy rugby, it would be nice. It would be effective, and it wouldn't slow the game down as much.
You have a look live with what everyone's saying, because I think that's the most important thing. The reason why we should have the TMOs for when everyone at home now, we're streaming the game to more people than ever before through Supersport schools. 80,000 people watch the Boyle Derby online and on TV, and everyone sees the knock on, but the referees can't, right? That's where, like Ben has said, it would be a disservice to not actually say we can have the TMO for those big decisions, those clear and obvious ones, nowhere near the level we have a TMO internationally, but just a controlled and clear framework of what it can be, and specifically so that it doesn't doesn't stretch the game out. So it's still fast flowing, good school rugby.
Yeah, I mean, also, I guess another aspect of touching on it is it is a benefit to the players. It's not just the people at home, because I mean, like you say, these players are going on to play bigger and better. And I mean, schoolboy rugby, because of how it's reffed, I mean, you have one guy, maybe two on the sides, but you can get away with a lot of stuff, punch in the ruck, an incorrect roll while trying to clear a player out. And I think having somebody there to call you out for it forces you to be accountable for your actions on the field. And it's a teaching, it's a learning lesson for you to know what, this is how you need to do it. And, maybe go into the next week, coach is like, okay, we're going to learn how to clear out properly so we don't have this call against us. And it's not just for the weekend, but it's for your rugby future.
And then for referees, also getting exposure to using communication and to have a TMO, that's also important because, referees are often rated based on their first team match performance.
Yeah.
And that's how you move up the ranks.
Yeah, so this year at Varsity Sevens was actually my first time using TMO, and I learned a lot of how to go about calling TMO. First of all, I had no idea how to do it. So having TMO at schoolboy rugby level would help me prep for the levels above and also up and coming referees, because you don't want to get a provincial game and then you get into trouble for not knowing how to call TMO because you don't look professional. So I think it's definitely a nice stepping stone for bigger games.
Okay, so I think what we're getting from that is that there needs to be a good balance with how the TMO is used, especially for school rugby, where we want to keep it school rugby, we don't want to slow it down. But when we have the ability to call it TMO, we have all these angles, everyone at home has seen it, it would be a disservice to not use it. So it's all about getting that balance right. Ben, do you think in international rugby, where we've got a lot more use of the TMO, that balance is also just as important?
Yeah, that's the challenge that we have at international level right now is, finding that balance between, when the TMO comes into the game and when the TMO doesn't, what are they choosing to be able to, inflict on the match? Because, there are a lot of decisions in the game that are really important. There are a lot of non-decisions that are important as well. We're constantly deciding, should we penalise, should we not penalise? I think we're getting to a really good stage right now where, the TMO isn't coming in for everything. Where they're coming in for, dangerous foul play. They're coming in for neck rolls around the neck. And, so we've seen, because the game's really well coached now from those new laws, we see players' technique change and we see less of those interventions needing to come in. So I think, the teamwork between players, coach, referee and TMO over the last 2 years has meant that, the game is more flowing. So as long as we get that, and I think, it's important that TMOs have a really good understanding of the game. So they're either ex-referees or ex-players. As soon as we get that and sort of that system of what they can come in and can't come in for, we have a really good game. And I think the spectators can trust that, well, the referee's going to make some great decisions, but there won't be a try that's allowed that shouldn't have been. And there won't be anything major missed.
Great. Thanks so much again, Ben. And thanks so much for joining us.
No, absolute pleasure. Thanks very much. And it's just exciting. Like, we love rugby. Referees love doing their job. And it's exciting just to be a year out from the World Cup and know that everyone's going to be watching. It's going to be good.
We've had a pretty robust discussion about school rugby, about the changes we think need to happen, particularly, obviously, the TMO. And it's going to be interesting to see what you have to say about it on our various social media platforms of Supersport Schools. There'll be polls, so you can go and vote TMO or not. That is the question for school rugby going into next season. What do you think? Zoe, thank you so much for joining us and being part of the chat.
Thank you so much.
Tim, thank you. And we'll be back soon to talk a bit more about the game that we love.
Yes, sir.
This has been the Supersport Schools podcast, bringing you stories of our future stars, powered by Spur Steak Ranchers.